follow what scares you the most. So for me, it has always been like this while I was growing up, and I still am doing this, and I will continue doing this as, the first moment that you need to make a decision between a few things that relate to your life and where you want to go. Choose the one that scares you the most.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Merle.
Hi, I'm very happy to have you here, Greta, today. Thank you very much for coming.
Same.
And before we start, so you are the CEO and co-founder of Mynerva, a startup that is developing a groundbreaking device for the treatment of diabetic neuropathy. Before we go into that, I would love to take a step back and hear a bit more about who you are and your path and how you've become who you are, basically. So you moved to Switzerland to do your PhD in neuroengineering at ETH. Can you tell us a bit about what made you decide to study at ETH, and also what exactly did you focus on in that subject?
Absolutely. So yes, first of all, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm very happy that we made it. And so I moved in Zurich in 2019, exactly to do my PhD in neuroengineering. The reason why I decided to come here instead of anywhere else in the world or stay in my country, which is Italy, is because during my master's, I got very passionate about brain-computer interfaces. And in my thesis, I worked on developing a brain-computer interface for locked-in patients, so that just by thinking of moving a robot, they could actually seek for help through this robot. So it has always been very fascinating for me to understand how the brain and the body are connected through psychology, through neuroscience, which is where I did my master's and bachelor's, and understanding how we can, trick the senses or artificially restore them. This is how, I was looking around and reading papers, and I found out about this laboratory in ETH, the neuroengineering laboratory. And I said, okay, no, I absolutely need to go there. But it was quite a funny story because effectively I had a bachelor in psychology and a master in neuroscience. So it didn't make too much sense for me to apply for a PhD position in an engineering school because I was not an engineer. So I said, okay, guys, let me come there for a few months. And if you like how I work, then we can do a PhD. I can do a PhD there, and then we'll see. So I stayed there for free, which in Switzerland is not very easy, for a few months. And then I got offered the PhD position.
That is super cool. And then so that worked out, and they said, okay, we really see that it works well together, and probably also your thesis and your goal of what you wanted to study and what you wanted to research fit well with the department.
Exactly. They did fit well. And actually, in the beginning, I loved the topic. That's really what I wanted to do. But in the meantime, I also, didn't want to work there forever for free. So, so I looked a bit around, and I actually got another PhD position I applied to, and it was a double degree, actually. It was a PhD where after 3-4 years, I would have gotten a double degree in neuroscience and biomedical engineering. And I got in. So I was chosen. In the end, I went to the neuroengineering lab, and I said, okay, the situation is this. Either I get the PhD here, which would be my preferred option, or I have to leave. And then in the end, it worked out. So I stayed in my favorite place.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Smart move with ETH. Very smart. And then you finished your PhD in 2023, so last year, and you started Mynerva.
Yes.
Tell us, why were you, or where did this drive come from to say, I will not stay in academia. I will do this thing. I will become an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. So Disclaimer, it has never been my wish to pursue an academic career.
Okay.
I have always wanted to do something more translational, something where I could, really bring these technologies to the hands of the patients. The reason why I embarked on an academic career is because anyways, I've always had a big passion for neuroscience, psychology, neuroengineering. So for me, it was kind of okay, let's find a way to make my dream come true. And in the meantime, let's try to find the team, the idea, build on top of something that's really strong from a scientific perspective and a research perspective. So that's why I wanted to do this even before doing my PhD. And yes, when I finished the PhD, which was in 2023, I really pushed a lot to give it a commercial turn. And yeah, things are very, going in the path that I would like them to go. So I'm very happy about that.
And when you say you wanted or you pushed it to go to a commercial way, how did you do that? So is there anything that you could also already say, this is a good way to do it if somebody is in academia and would like to go that path?
Absolutely. I mean, out of ETH and the University of Zurich and many different universities, there are a lot of spin-off companies. And I think the failure rate is more than 90%. And I think this is not really surprising because, you're doing your PhD, you're developing your baby project, you're super attached to it, and you focus so much on the technology that you don't think about the market, whether this is actually a solution for a problem that exists. And this is really, really, really true. And even when, you speak to young entrepreneurs, you see that everybody knows about this, but then in the end, they continue to focus on the technology. But in the end, there's so much, there's like a black hole of information that you learn by doing, or that you can be a little bit more aware of, maybe taking some courses. For me, Switzerland is an amazing environment for this because they offer courses for young entrepreneurs. There's a possibility of networking really with everybody. So my advice would be, if you want to, translate your research into a commercial product, start thinking about it early enough, even before developing your technology. Because when you're developing a technology, the problem is not really the solution, but the problem. So try, even, in the early days of your PhD, try to find the problem. And if you didn't do that, then start thinking about it later, because before you actually freeze the design of your device, there are many little changes that you can do to the technology that you've invented that can answer to a real problem.
And you just mentioned like courses and programs. What kind of courses did you take or programs did you take part in that supported you along this way?
So, well, right now I'm doing an executive MBA at the University of Zurich, which I think is a very good opportunity, of course, not only for networking, but to, have a good solid basis about things that you don't usually do in academia, accounting, corporate finance and these things. But even easier than that, and a bit cheaper because it can be quite expensive, there are, Startup Campus offers a lot of courses that I did and I loved, and they provide a very good basis. InnoSwiss offers, a coaching program, which even from an early stage when you have an idea, they can support you initially with 10,000 francs, then 35,000 francs to give you support from coaches that are experts. So, you can have your cool technology, but then you can have support from advisors on the business part, go-to-market strategy, reimbursement if you're doing a medical device, lawyers even. So that's really, really good. These ones, I did them all.
And your team, you did not meet them at one of these courses, right? You met them somewhere else. Can you tell us a bit about how you became co-founders?
Absolutely. So during the PhD, I was working in close contact, of course, with the professor of the laboratory and with two postdocs that were working a lot with me for the research part and the scientific aspects of the device. Then once we translated into a commercial approach, they are still active in being advisors on the clinical and the research part, and with some kind of, outsourced R&D projects, we work together. But every day in the office, now we're composed by 6 people. And it's me, our CTO, which has 25 plus years of experience in the medical devices. We have 2 engineers, a software and a hardware engineer. So the CTO is Luigi. The hardware and software engineer are Dunia and Robert. And Sara, which is the quality specialist, that just joined the team, so like a couple of weeks ago. And now we're expanding because, there's too many things to do and it gets really operationally heavy. And now we're looking for a product manager and an embedded system engineer. So yeah, slowly growing, but that's really, important to have the right skills, but most importantly, the right personality, because we're a small team and we need to like each other while we work every day together.
That's true. But it's nice to hear that it's growing and you have a solid, like a path that you're taking along as a team, which is very nice. So let's dive deep. Explain to us, what is diabetic neuropathy?
So diabetic neuropathy is basically a damage of the nerves that is a consequence of diabetes. Actually, neuropathy per se is a disease. It can be caused by diabetes, but it can be caused also by many different things: chemotherapy-induced neuropathy, COVID-induced neuropathy, idiopathic neuropathy, and many others. So this damage of the nerves has 2 problems. On one side, it causes the loss of sensations at the feet, which means that the patients, while they're walking, they cannot really feel the sole of their feet. And of course, this increases the risk of losing balance, which means falling, which means hospitalization. And at the same time, patients can have also chronic pain. So this is quite actually curious, because these 2 symptoms, so a positive and a negative one, you lose sensations, but you have chronic pain, they can coexist. And this chronic pain is, usually treated with opioids or medications which have severe side effects, while the loss of sensation doesn't have standard of care. There's no solution for that. So this is the problem that we're tackling. And
were there already some other developments that you were aware of, or some other research? Well, obviously there was research going on, but that was already a bit further in terms of commercial products when you started?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are some researchers that are doing sort of vibrating insoles that can help with balance. The results are not incredibly, life-changing, but still a small change can really improve the life of the patients. Unfortunately, if you have vibrating insoles, you can't really address pain, because for pain, you need to have some stimulation, direct stimulation of the nerves. Other solutions are, for example, there are big companies producing spinal cord stimulators. These are specifically focused on the pain part. However, there have been some debates on whether these actually really work and on what scale. So for how many patients, because, for spinal cord stimulators, you do need a surgery. So this means that you have to undergo a procedure, which is not that invasive, but still you need to have an operation, which increases the health risks and the associated costs, because these procedures are anywhere between 50 to 100K. So that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And then what exactly is your solution?
So our solution uses a non-invasive electrical stimulation of the nerves. So non-invasive, which means you don't need a surgery. One of our strongest unique selling proposition is really to be an easy to use. We always say everybody wears socks, so might as well wear a sock that relieves your symptoms. So the device looks like a sock, and we have pressure sensors under the sock that capture the pressure-related information while the patient is walking. This information gets sent to a microcontroller, which is placed on the calf of the patient, and this translates the pressure information into electrical parameters, electrical stimulation parameters that are driven through artificial intelligence, and these ones get delivered through electrodes printed inside of the sock. So this, creates a closed loop system that on one side can relieve pain, and on the other side, it can artificially restore the sense of touch, meaning that stimulate the nerves where they're healthy, and this restores the sensations under the feet.
Fascinating. I love it. What did the trial period look like for this product?
Intense.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, we tested 14 patients, so it's not a huge number, but still, if you're not big multinational CRO, it can get quite intense. And we tested them for just one day. So they received kind of around a 30-minute stimulation plus minus the calibration part. And then we were testing with the device on and with the device off, how they were walking, their balance, their symmetry in walking, and then their pain levels. And the results were really, really great, both in terms of balance. I mean, you could visually see the people walking better and also for the pain. So for the pain, of course, it's subjective. Sometimes you have just a few hours of pain relief. Just the other day, we had one patient coming into the office and telling us about his experience. And he said that for that small stimulation, he had 4 or 5 months of pain relief.
Wow.
So that was really, really great to hear that.
How many people are affected by this?
So the market is really incredible because diabetic patients are 500 million in the world, actually more, 560 million. And what not everybody knows is that neuropathy happens in 50% of them. So this is just considering diabetic neuropathy. Then if you add on top of that chemotherapy-induced neuropathy, COVID-induced, you get even bigger numbers. So the need is really there, not only in terms of market size, but in terms of solutions that I was saying before. We hear so often from patients that they don't want to take these medications because they create nausea, addiction, side effects. They can't sleep. They feel dizzy. They fall even more. So, you have one medication for one of your problems, pain, that worsens even more one other symptom that you have, which is the loss of balance due to the loss of sensations.
Yeah, that's incredible. But then your product is not yet on the market, right?
No.
So what is left? Like, what steps do you need to take to achieve this?
So today we have fully functional prototypes, but we're optimizing the design for industrial production. So we're aiming to freeze the design by the end of this year. Next year will be devoted to the certification. We're starting with first an FDA certification. And then we, in parallel, will do a clinical trial to gather the data for the CE certification. So the idea is to penetrate the market in 2026, starting with the US market.
And in terms of these certifications, because I know this is like, there's so many things you need to think of, and it's a huge step that you need to take. What are some like challenges that are coming or already are on your horizon for getting the certifications? Yeah,
so the regulatory path can always be a huge problem especially for startups, because it can easily delay by years and increase your costs by millions. So it's not something that, you can just think about it at a later stage. You need to start to think about it right away. So for us, one of the challenges is that FDA offers different paths to get the certification. And of course, we have an innovative part, which is the sensory feedback restoration and then the pain reduction. And of course, it highly depends on what the FDA thinks in terms of risks and safety, on whether we can actually go through faster paths or we need to do longer paths. However, the FDA has a lot of gives a lot of support, especially to startups and small, medium enterprises. While now in Europe with these new MDR regulations, it has become quite intense to get the CE certification. And that's why we see a lot of startups preferring to go through the FDA path because it's simply, faster and cheaper. And, when you're a startup, and you necessarily for the CE certification need to do a clinical trial, those are millions. It's not, 50,000 francs that maybe you can win through an award and you can fund your research there.
That's very interesting to see also the development here and where startups are leaning towards for this process.
Yeah.
And in terms of patents, do you have any strategy tips or can tell us a bit about the process for patent filing?
Yeah, absolutely. So We do have a patent that's going into the internationalization phase of the PCT submission. For me, the patent strategy is something that can help you and kill you at the same time, you know, because, you know, somebody says there's always a way to work around your patent, and that's true. I mean, not for specifically our patent, but in general, if somebody wants to change a few things, it can be done. That's why in general, you always want to do, you know, very general patents to cover not only specifically your technology, or you do a more general one, or you use, I don't know, the Nestlé approach, and over a single device, you have 2,000-3,000 patents. But startups usually don't have this type of funding to support these costs. And why do I say that it can kill you and it can help you is because you definitely need patents to protect your technology, to make sure that it's not easy for competitors to copy you. But at the same time, you know, submitting a patent can be really time consuming. Unless, of course, you have great lawyers. But then again, great lawyers are very expensive. So you want to take some of the research and patent drafting and the drawings on yourself, because you need to save costs somewhere. So this is on one side. So you need to balance between what you really want to patent and what you think is the core of your technology and what's not necessary. Because what's not necessary then can be left to a second stage where you will actually have your patent strategy. And there are some companies in which their patent strategy is, of course, to protect their technology, but then also to file patents that have nothing to do with their technology, but that block competitors. And so for this, of course, you know, for a startup, it's too early to do something like this. Yeah.
Which way did you go?
We went through the general approach.
We did the competitor thing.
Yes. No, we started there. No, we did the general part because there are also a lot of patents in the field of neurostimulation. So we wanted to really protect what was core of our technology. You know, the way we have the electrodes, how we do the calibration, and all of this is protected through the patent.
And you also now mentioned all these different facets of your product and of your startup. How do you find a pricing for this? How do you come up with a solid business model that works for this type of product?
We could, you know, you just opened the Pandora box, I think. Because I think this is true for probably every company, but specifically when you're in the medtech field, this is, you know, you really have to connect 3,000 dots. Because pricing, you know, you can start from your competitors and you see, okay, how much does their solution cost? Can we offer a cost-effective solution? So either something that costs less or something that is much more effective. Because, for example, medications, sometimes they're much cheaper than a medical device. But then again, you have the side effects. So first you can do like this. But then you have to consider many different things. First of all, reimbursement. So when you're a medical device, of course, you will find people that are willing to pay out of their pockets initially to have your solution, but you cannot think that this is a scalable business model. No. Especially, you know, when you go in countries that are not so economically well funded as, you know, Switzerland, for example, it can be really tough to scale and to be able to reach different populations. So reimbursement is something definitely that you need to think about soon, very, very soon, even before you have your device done. So that potentially you can also modify in certain ways your device to make sure that you can have reimbursement and reach your final customers and clients. The third thing that you need to think of is who's going to pay for, you know, the device. I mean, if you have a reimbursement strategy and it's super strong, of course, the payer, so the insurance company, is the one who pays for your solution. But when you're in medical devices, the payer is not the only one that you need to take into consideration, because you have the payer, the prescriber, and the patient. So the payer, we've already talked about. The prescriber is the doctor. And, you know, you can have an amazing reimbursement strategy, but then if you don't have the doctor that prescribes your technology, that is aware of your solution, your solution simply will not be prescribed, hence not used. And finally, you have the patient. And the patient per se is the final user of the device. So in all of this, you're developing a technology. It's super cool. It's super complicated, but you want to make it look simple. But then in the end, who really uses it is the patient. So you need to develop a device that answers to the need of the patient to make sure that they're compliant with the usage of the device. Because otherwise, there will be a lot of prescriptions. But then again, the patients will take it home, maybe use it one day, then they don't like it, and nobody will ever use it again. You will not have recurring revenues, and this can be really a nightmare. And then probably finally, the last thing is to think early on also about distributors, especially when you're a small company in the medtech field, which is, populated by giants. It's a bit unrealistic to think that you can scale into such a market, such a complex market, only with the use of an internal sales team. Yeah. You can, of course, have that maybe in the beginning when you're trying to understand whether you actually really do have a product market fit. But then once you are scaling, you need to have distributors.
And where are you in this process? Are you working together with the insurances?
So we are now working with a US-based company for the reimbursement strategy.
Okay.
They have connections with insurance companies. They actually have within the team people who have worked for insurance companies. So that's really good. We started working them not since a long time ago. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm pretty confident because they're experts in the field of neurostimulation and in the field of diabetes. So that's a really nice thing. This is something that I think I can suggest in general when you're a startup and you're working with external consultants. It's always good to find somebody who's in your niche market rather than, having big companies that give you their super cool templates. But then in the end, don't apply to your case because you really need to think outside the box.
Yeah. So in terms of market, are you focusing on the US market at the moment?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes. We're still keeping an eye on Switzerland because Switzerland in 2022 declared that they will sell FDA-approved devices. And there have been a lot of agreements and advancements in this, but still this is not in place. So we will actually know by the end of this year when this will happen. In theory, we'll see. But if Switzerland will sell FDA-approved devices, we might start with either a soft launch here or sales here. So it might be that either then starting from the US, which is anyways an unknown market because we're not based there. We start from here because we're based here, and then we expand to the US.
I think that's probably also very interesting for other startups in the medical field that, as you said before, also will go through the FDA approval rather than Switzerland-based. And you just said it's an unknown market. What are some things that you need to look out for when you are expanding into new markets or like looking to base your product there?
Everything. I mean, it's really everything. It's even, marketing, communication, how you can say these things. In the US, these are completely different than in Europe. So marketing, definitely. The type of population. So people, in terms of BMI, in terms of race, in terms of are different. So you need to make sure that your device, I'm going to say, a very basic thing, but our device is a sock, smart sock. So you need to make sure that the size fits with the population profile, which can be very different also from Switzerland. So this is another thing. Then you need to, choose and understand how the reimbursement works. I mean, the reimbursement in the US is very complex. So, reimbursement in general is a complex topic, but in the US, I feel like it's even more. And you really need to understand how it works there to make sure that you at least understand how to apply those concepts to your device. And distributors, investors also, if you're a startup, you'll want to raise some money probably in the US at a certain point, if the market that you want to enter in, and you probably want to raise a Series A or B there. Also because in the US, typically rounds tend to be larger compared to Switzerland. or Europe in general. And so you need to understand what investors are looking for in a pitch deck, which is completely different in communication style. They tend to be a little bit more show off, and, you need to have a really strong and appealing story. And that's good. I mean, I like the approach. I really like that approach, but you need to be aware of it, because sometimes, you always hear this, that in the US, there's more the tendency of saying yes right away and then maybe not doing the things and, having a lot of enthusiasm. While in Switzerland, it's more you gotta know right ahead, straightforward, and then maybe things change if you convince the person. So this relates to also cultural differences that you need to be aware of once you decide to penetrate the market.
Yeah, I think that's a super important message also to understand, that even the way you communicate your product and the language that you use, you need to adapt it also. For example, also you have more storytelling in the wording, have a bit more flourishing maybe in here, a bit more like clear and fact stated, I would presume.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, super interesting. Are you over in the US often then?
Yes, so I'm leaving this weekend, actually. I'm going in New York, New Haven, Boston, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Have a few meetings there. And also, since I'm doing an executive MBA at the University of Zurich, as I said before, I'm going there because it's also a learning expedition there. So it's a bit of mixture between the two things. So I'm very much looking forward. And I foresee many more trips to the US. Now, the next one is going to be planned for October. And so, yeah.
Yeah. You said before also fundraising in the US, and that opened a new question for me. How are you funded at the moment?
So we're part of the VIS Zurich Translational Center. This is a joint accelerator between the ETH and the University of Zurich. And we're funded by them, which is going to cover the next 3 years or so. And they provide support, of course, economically. It's dilutive money. So actually, initially in the research part, we got grants, awards, all non-dilutive money. This was dilutive, but they don't provide only the funds. They provide also support. For example, they have a team of 16 engineers specialized in medical devices that support us in the development of the device, that are paid by them, but that work together with us. They have people from quality, regulatory that support us, in establishing a quality management system, which is really... that's a black hole of information that can, you need to think about that early on. And so, yeah, it's wonderful. They help you really in everything.
And are you now then going out for VCs?
So, yes, we actually do have interested VCs, business angels. I'd say quite a lot, which makes me very happy, especially because we're not fundraising at the moment, because we got into VC in September 2023. My take on this is that before going into a VC, we'd probably go through the business angel or, that route, simply because we're looking also for, strong support in these stages. We don't only want economical funds, but we want support in the US, understanding the market network there. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. And do you have any tips for people that are coming from academia, moving to this entrepreneurial path? And I mean, VIS, for example, but do you also have any other tips on where they could secure support or funding?
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest anyone who has an idea or a product to start with non-dilutive funding. So all of the awards that you can get that really, help you in the first development stage and getting some traction. After that, you can, VIS is definitely an option. Otherwise, you typically don't want to start going directly for VCs because for the money that you need, you're probably going to give too much equity away of your company. So you can start with the classical, family, friends, and fools. Get a little bit of money there. And, the more you develop your product, the more you get traction, the more you can get closer to the VC route. And here in Switzerland, especially for the early stages, there are many different VCs, red alpine, or there are many different ones that you can find and you can talk to. But before, go through the family, friends, and fools part.
The 3 Fs, the magic 3 Fs.
Yeah.
And when you look at you now, like creating a base in the US, do you have any anchors there or organizations that you reach out to get a hold of the market?
Yeah, absolutely. Now we will be going also with SwissNex there, which I think is a very cool organization, based in the strategic cities that typically you want to, New York, Boston, San Francisco. So that's for sure an advice that I can give. On our side, then we are securing some clinical support there because it's very important to have your key opinion leaders there advocating for your product. And what we're exploring now is distributors and manufacturers, because you will also have to think about, logistics and shipment. If you produce your device in the US, the shipment is also going to be much less expensive rather than Europe to there. So we do have these clinical anchors, strategic anchors in terms of SwissNex or organizations that can support us. And then it's really about stakeholders. So we have a lot of contacts with healthcare practitioners there because for me, it's really important to understand, the patient journey. What are really the problems that the patients and the doctors complain about that we can solve with our solution, not only from a hardware perspective, meaning decreasing the symptoms, but also from a digital perspective. How can we support your treatment and the monitoring of your disease through our technology?
Mm-hmm. And now, let's say in a few months, years, you've grown in the US and you probably also have grown a team there because you cannot do all of it from Switzerland, right? You need to have a base in the US. How do you make sure that you find right people when you're growing?
Oh, this is
another Pandora's box.
Yeah, another one, really. So for me, HR was, I didn't expect it to be difficult, but I didn't expect it to be that difficult because finding the right people can be really hard. It can be hard not only in terms of, skills, because you always hear hire for personality, not for skills. And it's true. And I'm a firm believer of this because if you need to grow, you need to, as I was saying before, like each other. But when you're a startup, you can't also expect that you have, 6 months, a year to onboard the person. And we are working in a very highly regulated market where if you don't know the medical device field, it can be really, you can easily lose a year in getting to know the things in a way that you can start to strategize and understand how this can be applied to our product. So this is one thing. The next thing is, how do you do the interview process? I have to, it's me personally, of course, that I screen the CVs, but then you have so many other different things that you need to do. So I look at the CV, then I screen them, then I have to make 1, 2, 3 different calls because you need to make sure that the candidate is the right person for that role.
Yeah.
And then, from a personality perspective, you need to get along. So you need to have the skills. You need to be the right candidate in terms of, background. You need to have the right personality, not only in terms of, we like each other, we laugh and whatsoever, but also in terms, I need to see the passion for this project because I want to work with people that, share together with me the long-term vision, that are ambitious, that want the maximum out of the things that we're doing. Because we're a startup, we're not a big corporate, we're not a 9-to-5 job, we're definitely not that. So you need to be comfortable with this, and to be comfortable with this, you need to have passion. Otherwise, you will burn out at a certain point.
Yeah, so it's like a balance. On the one hand side, you need to know that they have passion, so you can trust them. And on the other hand, also for them, really important to have passion, because otherwise it's so hard to find the energy within yourself to do this.
Absolutely. And to be resourceful also, to find the right solutions, to be curious and explore. So,
So what is the goal the end goal for you for Mynerva?
Unicorn. Of course. I mean, cool. How could I answer any differently?
What's the next step for you to reach this goal?
Get the certification and start selling the device.
I love it. This is a clear answer. And what is next for you personally?
Well, I identify myself a lot with the company. So I also strategize in terms of my personal future together also with what I envision for the company. So I see myself living, for example, in the US in a few years from now. So also from a personal perspective, you need to make sure that everything is aligned. I'm very happy that my boyfriend is aligned with this vision that he wants to go there too. So the next step on maybe that would be in a few years is to move there in the US.
Well, then we'll make sure to visit you there and do a catch-up episode.
Absolutely. I'd love that.
And before we go into our rapid fire questions, I wanted to ask you if you have any resources, tools, gadgets, books, tips, anything that you would like to give to our listeners.
Books, I can probably recommend No Rules Rules. It's a book that talks about the company culture in Netflix. I think it's controversial. Probably not everybody agrees with this vision, and still this is not fully implemented or what we are living today in Mynerva. But I think that relates to what we were saying before, have, passionate people. I love to read books. Typically, they don't necessarily need to be related to, work or anything. I don't like too much science fiction. Fiction books. But for example, Dawkins, Hawking, I love them completely. So the scientific aspects, how physics works. I think these things just open your mind into being curious. So definitely this. So this in terms of books. In terms of just a personal advice and mantra that I usually say to young entrepreneurs is the pursuit of fear. Follow what scares you the most. So for me, it has always been like this while I was growing up, and I still am doing this, and I will continue doing this as, the first moment that you need to make a decision between a few things that relate to your life and where you want to go. Choose the one that scares you the most, the one where you think you're not prepared enough, that you don't know enough, that you will need to catch up, you will need to understand more things. You just don't have the skills to do that. Do that. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
What would you say is your most used app besides like messenger apps?
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Facebook for business.
Yes, exactly. LinkedIn, and then I usually have one game every 2-3 months that changes, that when I go to bed I play sometimes. Now it's Squad Busters.
Cool. Good to know. All right. And then I will end with our rapid fire questions.
Yes.
So I'll ask a question and you just say the first thing that pops into your head. Well, the first one I think you already answered, but still. Researcher or entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur.
What's your proudest Mynerva achievement so far?
Growing the team.
Great. What surprised you most about becoming an entrepreneur?
The difficulties sometimes, the intensity of having to do really everything at once.
And last, but definitely not least, Italy or Switzerland?
Iceland.
You got the diplomatic way.
Yes.
Very Swiss.
Very Swiss.
Amazing. I love this. Thank you so much. I thought this was such an interesting conversation and so many amazing tips and insights and learnings. I feel like people can really take a lot away from this episode. So thank you so much for sharing, Greta, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.